This is going to be a fun, exciting, slightly different topic than you heard in the last session.
Actually, I thought it was a music hall.
Yeah, exactly. What's I think interesting.
Better socks than mine.
I always keep Einstein close, especially when you're with smarter people than you. So we've got a really fascinating panel. We're going to let a few more people in, but
if the guard lets them in.
If the guard lets them in, yeah, we have
tight security going.
We're the only panel with a velvet rope, so welcome to the VIP session. So it's really interesting. The last, just as a sort of warm things up, the last fella mentioned they're using GPUs to drive the application, and I thought that was interesting. A little hint of what we're going to talk about, but if you guys want to think about why that's relevant to this topic, using GPUs to process OCR data for bills shows a pretty broad application. It is an application of the metaverse in some ways, I think. So hopefully we'll be expanding your sense of what the metaverse is and getting down to details too. So.
Okay, just now that we travel from Einstein, graphic, GPU to music, anyone have a guess like what the session is about? We're not formally kicking off. We're just waiting for a few folks. Are we kicking off?
I think we can. Let's let a couple more people in. I see a couple of our folks in. Yeah. I'm here. We're ready to go.
We're ready to go. Okay.
Okay, they're letting people in the door. Excellent. Okay, so we're going to get started. My name is Scott Pobiner. I'm the head of UX or user experience at Deloitte within our strategy and analytics practice. I am incredibly fortunate to be able to speak with two people who I hold in high esteem. So Frances Yu, to my left, she is the head of our unlimited reality practice. It is the practice that will be powering our, we could say metaverse play, but it's less of a play and more of a sea change in how we're thinking about technology at the firm. She is also head of our global strategy and applied design practice, or the global head of that practice. So also really interesting perspectives. In addition, because why have one when you can have many roles? She has led, mentored C-suite across the tech spectrum and telco spectrum for about 20 years in our practice. So lots of experience working with client services and really taking new technologies into the C-suite, into these enterprise organizations. To her left is my new friend, I'd like to say friend, Richard Kerris, a polymath, polyartist, and many things, but I will describe, I guess, his formal role. NVIDIA's VP of Omniverse Platform Development. What's fascinating, I think, there's many things that are fascinating we're going to talk about, but Richard's career really spanned this idea of the luminary creative tech and creative companies like Apple, Lucasfilm, and Amazon and AWS, with the through line being this laser focus on bringing new ideas to life. And this is certainly some new ideas we're going to be talking about and what NVIDIA is working on. And so we're going to have this, we're going to try to make it a balanced discussion, talking about technology powering the Omniverse, Omniverse powering your business, and then how to get started. And so as a first step, what I'd love to do is open it to the metaverse. And I saw some raised eyebrows, maybe some skepticism. Absolutely. Everyone get your goggles, look under your chairs, and you can, no. There's no goggles under your chairs. Exactly. Yeah, it's a VR car. So what I'd love to do is just have a little bit of a let's call it a palate cleanser on the metaverse. What is your thinking about what the metaverse is? Not necessarily definition, but what is it becoming?
Well, it's probably one of the most confused words over the past 6 or 8 months these days, where everyone's, is it Ready Player One? We're all going to be wired in, floating avatars and things like that. And certainly that's an experience that you can have, but you can actually do that today. There's nothing really holding you back from doing those things today. The metaverse is actually the network. It's not a destination. It's the next generation of the internet. And why it's so exciting to so many different types of companies is because in much the same way we can seamlessly go from website to website today, we'll be able to go from virtual world to virtual world through the metaverse. So think of the next generation of the internet as being 3D centric. Now, it doesn't mean that we're all floating avatars and we're all drifting around and things. That is simply a mechanism which you can experience virtual worlds today. The key thing here is you won't need different drivers and software inputs in order to go to that virtual world. In the same way, if you remember the early days of the internet, those of us that are old enough to remember, what browser are you using? What extension do you have installed? Do you have Flash? Or you can't experience this website. And that caused a big disruption at the very start of the dot-com boom, if we all remember. Then things got ratified with HTML. Now we take it for granted, whether you're on a mobile device, your TV, your computer, anything can experience any website seamlessly. The same will be true with 3D. And what you do in those 3D experiences is really what we're going to talk about today, whether you're talking about the industrial side of the metaverse, the entertainment side of the metaverse, the experience side of the metaverse. It will all be as seamless as experience the web today. That's how we look at the metaverse, the network.
Interesting. Francis, I wonder if you want to speak a little bit about, from your perch, what are you seeing and what are clients, customers, what's happening? What's actually happening now on the ground?
Yeah, I think one of the things is I would echo what Richard said in terms of we've been here before, right? And in fact, this very place, a decade ago, I was here at that back in the day was the emerging EdTech, that whole EdTech ecosystem, right? We've been here before, and each and every time when you have a generational shift, the interesting happen not just on the technology side, it's always about how human ingenuity to set that into the context of how they work, how we engage, how we interact with each other. Now, with Metaverse, with the 3D internet, and by the way, the term Metaverse in the business setting has been around for well over a decade. In Silicon Valley, back in 2006, I remember the bunch of technologists, business folks, creatives really got together and started look at what does the next generation of the internet look like? And the name is called Metaverse Foundation, right? So a lot of hard work went into this. And what we see here today, as with previous generations of technology shifts, is really Metaverse is for everyone. When we start looking at this, you apply into domains of customer domain. We're seeing the customer domain facing really looking at how we would leverage a engaging, a immersive, a human-centered experience, moving from 3D environments to environments, driving next generation of customer engagement. And in doing so, also thinking about the core content, core storytelling about your brand, extending into those spaces to drive new business growth. So that's one domain. The second domain, Richard touched on in terms of the industrial applications, really looking at how you could apply this whole notion of virtual production over physical, leading into physical implementation. The concept of the digital content and physical objects overlaying the interplay, leading to a whole host of manufacturing, reimagining how you would design for manufacturability, how you would think about the production process. Last but not least, I would say just as important is not forget that how much time we spend at work. So the enterprise metaverse for engaging customers, for employees, for learning training purposes is also something we see a ton of energy.
Interesting. Well, so given that, so let's say there's action, there's some activity. I want to give the people what they want. We're here to talk about artificial intelligence or AI, right? I'm assuming everyone is here to talk about AI. So Richard, I want to know, like we've spoken about 3D and the spatial, but where is AI and how are you and your colleagues really thinking about the role that AI is supposed to be playing in this?
Great question. So let me I'll level set it a little bit. So we have a platform that's called Omniverse, which you can think of as an analogy to an operating system for the metaverse. It's set out to be a product, but it's a compute platform. So you bring your different technologies that you use today, whether you're a designer designing a car, you bring your software and connect to it. Whether you're an architect building a house or building a building, you connect your existing software to it. At the very core of it is a lot of AI technologies for true to reality simulation. For example, When an architect is going to build a building, they want to know how that building is going to deal with weather and deal with different scenarios. There's famous stories out there, and if you haven't heard them, just Google them sometime, about a mirrored building that was built in the center of a city, and once it was completed, the sun was hitting those mirrors and reflecting across town and blowing cars up. It's a true story. Now, what happened in that process was they did render the building and look what it was going to look like in a representative state. Now, where we've migrated to using AI in a true to reality state, you actually get to see a digital twin of that building before you have committed to it in the physical world. So it's incredibly important, and it's much more efficient for what's going to be done. That's just one example of an AI use case, but we also have AI used as avatars. You can train an avatar, and I don't mean like the ones that we have at home where you ask it, you know, if I say the name, or somebody's probably got a device, it'll say what, you know, set a timer or something like that. Those are instruction-based, one level. But an avatar that actually can be trained on a particular given subject and to be an expert on that subject. So let's take that example of an architect, and you're building something in a land that you've really never been to. You may have visited or something, and you want to have it be as authentic and appreciative to the society and to the culture. You may train an avatar to be a collaborative consultant with you in that process. So now you have a digital avatar as part of your collaboration team that has all the information about where you're building, and it can give you all kinds of information. There's just two examples, but there's many other kinds of use cases. The idea that it's a technology that can be applicable in many different ways depending on how you train it means that we're going to be much more efficient and much more safe as we do these types of things. And those are just a few examples.
So you mentioned the word operating system earlier on, and you're talking about all these different applications. It does sound like you're talking about a bit of an operating system when we think about what these things, and I'm assuming people know what ChatGPT is. If you don't, just open your phone. And there's been some fascinating experiments in less than a week. So I'm wondering, what's your perspective on this idea of a new operating system?
Well, we use the analogy, to be clear, that our compute platform is like an operating system. It is not, you know, a operating system with, you know, email and all the other things. But the reason I use that analogy is because people look at NVIDIA as typically a hardware company. Now with a lot of software, we actually have more software engineers than hardware engineers. But what are we doing? We're harnessing the power of the hardware through a platform that anybody can connect to. What's an analogy for that? Well, anybody connects to an operating system. Anybody connects to whether it's a Mac or Windows. So it's thought of in that same kind of way. Now, to the points that you were talking about with generative AI and those types of things, again, more technology that's taking advantage of AI faster than anything we've seen in any recent times, right? I mean, just a few weeks ago, we were tracking about 250 companies doing generative AI, and we're over 700 now. Right, and so what does that mean? Does it replace things? I love the analogy of like music, when synthesizers came out and sampling came out and all of that. Everybody was worried, oh my gosh, if I can sample Beethoven, is that stealing? Is it? Forget all of those parts first and just look at it as another arrow in the quiver of your creative process. The fact that a director can say, I want this scene to take place here, and he can tell the computer, create this environment, is just a path to the vision of what the storytelling is all about. So we love it. I think it's great.
I think I just echoing that in that design is almost like a universal craft, right? One of the most amazing thing that's happening right now is we're truly humanizing technology. And we say this for longest time, but they think about what makes human. We're spatial beings. So now we're entering the 3D web. We actually adding perception to otherwise a relatively 2D experience. We're also adding sonification into this whole experience. We're adding greater degree of vision, and all those adding to making the whole digital experience, the world we live in, physical and digital, a lot more human-like. But now to that, I think one of the things we're seeing, design is a universal craft, but the workflow in today's environment is highly tied towards the tool that you use. And a lot of the tools have proprietary, they have their own language, they have own, and what I love about what you guys are doing with USD, with Omniverse, that whole ecosystem, is give a common language set for the designers, for the creators, and the creators could be doing in the industrial setting a common language set so that they can truly unleash what they do the best, right?
Let me just go deep on the USD aspect so everyone understands what it is and why it's so important. We did not create USD. Actually, USD, or Universal Scene Description, came from Pixar. Pixar had this unique problem of different teams using different softwares to try to realize the productions that they were working on. Super smart teams, they decided to build a container-based approach so that all those things could have a common way of describing the 3D environment. Then they open sourced it. And now most every company today that's in 3D either supports USD or has a plan to support USD. We made the decision early on to invest heavily in USD for Omniverse because we look at it as the HTML of 3D. If you remember when I talked about the consistency between websites that really happened because of HTML, the same kind of consistency between 3D environments is happening because of USD. So USD, think of it as the HTML of 3D. That's what's going to help unify all these different types of virtual worlds, no matter what they be. So that's a key aspect there.
I can't get this idea of an operating system out of my head, though, because it feels like, it does feel like you're talking about a creator's operating system. And to date, as a creator myself, I don't think we've seen it, but we have seen so many creator tools, with obviously video producers, individuals creating fascinating things. And I wonder, Francis, how this idea of intersection of 3D and immersive technologies, what are you seeing? Because we have thousands of creators around the world in our practices and firms. How is it enabling new experiences and new business opportunities? What's your thinking around this?
Right. I think one of the things that are just kind of building on the whole concept of humanizing technologies, now we start entering into the 2D to 3D from a creation perspective. It's not just a simple ad. It's not just a simple extrusion. It's actually a complete different way of thinking through. You could design a product before it ever been manufactured. Now that opens up a whole different ways of collaboration between the idea to prototype, between the design to manufacturing, and also between the idea side and the user side. By the end of the day, technology has to be valuable when it's in use. So that would start seeing, number one is this whole process of collaboration across the value chain, across different members, creators of that value chain is changing the game, right?
Amazing.
Yeah.
And I just to talk about this changing the game. Now, back to Richard. What are some of the things that AI is powering in this context and this game changing? And I know there's a couple really interesting research papers out there.
Yeah. Well, I think it's to what you were saying, Francis. The way we've traditionally used the web is more like a witness, right? We go in and we witness a web page, we can see it, but you don't really go into it. You don't get to experience it. And so what's taking place is, in the metaverse, and AI is a big part of this, is to be able to go in and experience the virtual environment. Whether you want to walk around the environment that you might be building a factory, you might be training robots in a warehouse. And traditionally, you would do those things, one-to-one with the computer and the robot. But now you can create a true-to-reality simulation of the physical world in the digital world. And that's using all the tools you're familiar with, but adding the complexities of AI and other things. So now you can experience that world before it's ever been built.
True reality, for everybody who's thinking like, well, let's get grounded on what do we mean when we say true reality?
Well, in that example I gave earlier where the building was realized and built and then the reality hit that they didn't expect, right? Yeah. That was a representative rendering of what they expected it to be. It looked beautiful, but it didn't have a true to reality. What true to reality means is that in that virtual world, it has to be indistinguishable from the physical world. So if something knocks over, if something is heavy, if something, whatever it's going to be, it has to match. And that's why things like synthetic data generation, term you'll hear very frequently, SDG, why that's increasing in importance everywhere. You don't want to train a robot in a factory with objects that have been created in 3D that don't have the properties that they would have in the physical world. Like today, we're all seeing these beautiful 3D objects, but they're primarily movie props, right? If there's a surface, their texture that looks like a crate, it looks like, an object. But if you're going to train something like a robot or autonomous vehicle on the streets and stuff, the objects that are created have to have the properties that match the physical world in order for them to be trained properly. So SDG is one of the fastest growing content creation tools that you're going to hear about if you haven't already, and it's going to be huge.
For anyone, by the way, on the topic of what's true reality, there's a great read, the book called Reality Plus. It's a techno philosophy book, highly recommended if you're looking for like holiday reading list. I think one of the things that's interesting, that simulation in terms of the physical representation of in the virtual environment to simulate what's happening, what might happen in the physical environment. And there's also virtual to virtual simulation. I think for us, one of the things we're using SDG, as Richard talked about on this topic, is we start to look at the solving for some of the really incredible edge cases. And in environments, take an example. I don't know if anyone from California, hand raising, okay? There's a few, okay. Wildfire, huge challenge all around, and some of those actually, if you're thinking about some of the causes for wildfire, asset management, vegetation management, when you think about the utility poles, electricity poles, in most of them actually not in the city, right? In the covering remote, the mountains, etc. Now those are pretty aging, the telephone poles or utility poles. If there's any spark defect on those poles, it triggered wildfire. So what we've been doing historically, flying drones, computer vision, but now we're also leveraging SDG to help us driving better defect detection. And those becoming important, increasingly important, applying to some of the truly mission critical areas like dam, poles, right?
Mm-hmm. To get potentially a little meta, we're basically saying, forgive the no pun intended, but we're basically saying a box that knows it's a box. Mm-hmm. In the world, a box doesn't need to know it's a box. A fire doesn't need to know it's fire, but artificial intelligence needs to be used such that the box knows it needs to behave like a box. The fire needs to burn things.
Yeah, here's another example. I don't know if anyone's driven in an autonomous vehicle yet. We've all seen cars driving around cities with the Cyclops top, and they're scanning the roads and scanning the objects and stuff in order to build a understanding of how the car would drive around without a driver. There's a big initiative going on for autonomous driving. Now, in a synthetic world that's true to reality, we can build a digital twin of the city, and instead of having one or two cars driving around, we can have hundreds. But all the content in that digital twin has to be true to reality of the physical world in order for the training to be appropriate. But what that allows us to do is be able to train on many types of scenarios. So you can use AI to have hundreds of thousands of different scenarios of those cars when they drive, the ball that rolls out, the oil slick that's there, the water, the wind, whatever it may be. Because when you're doing it in the physical world, it's whatever that car happened to capture that moment is what it's been trained on. And they keep getting better. But we can accelerate that learning by using synthetic data, digital twins. And I would much rather drive in a car that's been trained that way than one that's been trained on a go-by-go.
It's funny, when we learn to drive, we all learn defensive driving, right? It's not you're not the problem. The other drivers are what you have to worry about. I find this fascinating because effectively you're saying we're training vehicles to worry about the other drivers, not themselves. And I think that's quite fascinating.
And it's any scenario, right? Because it's going down, and like I said, it's a blue ball rolled out in front. Oh, but the car only experienced a red ball, so it didn't know what to do, and it goes forward. In a digital twin environment, you can literally have an infinite number of ways to train and things. And that's just one example, but we're seeing it with robotics, we're seeing it in all different types of industries right now. And it's something that's gonna affect us all, whether it's autonomous driving or wildfire, or how, there's Deutsche Bahn, one of the largest transportation companies in the world, that's been doing digital twins of their railway systems. It's over 37,000 kilometers of railway, because they can monitor it, they can understand it, and they can do predictive analysis before something happens in the real world. So it's safer for everybody, it's more efficient for everybody, and it's cost effective.
And by the way, this is exactly the kind of use case is also keeping our workers safe, right? Extension to that, around the globe, we've seen the extension, because some of the environments like offshore drilling. It really gets into a whole host of how do we think about the technologies we have today to actually think about different ways of dealing with and benefiting from Mother Earth energy, right? So
Yeah,
Yeah.
we've started an initiative about a year and a half ago called Earth 2, where NVIDIA is working with some of the top researchers in the world to build a digital twin of Earth. And why are we doing that? To understand climate change. How understanding, well, one thing on a part of the planet being done can affect something on a different part of the planet. So it's specifically designed to focus on climate first.
Yeah.
And it's a multi-year major supercomputer initiative that's going on, but again, to benefit us all.
Amazing.
and some of the things it doesn't have to be in terms of in the ways whereby you require the entire ecosystem or entire industry to come together. There are some of the things more nano related, right? Just as impactful. So for example, one of the things that we're working with Richard and team is really looking at how when you start looking at interventional heart, cardiology, one of the big challenge is really looking at simulation. And simulation in terms of the edge simulation for cardiologists, everything, if most of the case everything go well, that's great. But what if things don't go well? The edge cases, that's where the decisioning in the moment for edge cases is where an experienced cardiologist versus a young, early stage make a huge difference in life and death. Right?
Any cardiologists in the room? No?
Well, actually, I'm just curious. Any data scientist in the room, AI data scientist?
Okay, we got some.
And any designers in the room?
Okay, well, I'll represent us. It's okay.
You're gonna carry the load. Yeah.
I happily carry the load, although I'm going to need a bigger team to work with all of you. So let's, this is amazing, and though I doubt maybe there are some people planning traffic or planning surgery, but let's try to make it real for the audience a little bit. Richard, what are business executives doing to get started? I mean, do they hire a whole team of modelers and designers, and do they buy a bunch of technology, or what is the first
You're
step?
seeing more and more chief metaverse officers starting to pop up, so CMOs in a different style. But in much the same way companies had to adapt or die around the internet. Like how many brick and mortar stores are gone because they didn't adapt to what was taking place online. Companies are looking at this transform in much the same way. What does the metaverse mean for us as a company, whether I'm a company that's making musical instruments, or I'm a company that's building houses, or I'm a company doing X, Y, Z? There's a role in there for a lot of these things, because if you're a consumer-based company and you're building products for the home, you're going to want to have a place in the metaverse that people can visualize and experience what those objects would be like in the home. And we're seeing that already today. They're just not all interconnected seamlessly. But I can go to IKEA or other stores and pick a piece of furniture and then with my phone see it sampled in my room. So we're seeing metaverse applications already happening. They're just not all seamlessly interconnected.
And can people in this room today, if they wanted to pick things up, I mean, I'm assuming we got some makers, some people who want to actually get their hands dirty. I see some people nodding. What's the easiest way? What's the first step they can do?
If you have most current versions of phones, iPhones especially, they have a LiDAR scanner built into it. Nice. So I can scan this room in 3D, and then there's hundreds of apps and probably now thousands of apps that allow me to go put objects in that room and see it. There's stores, like I said, with IKEA and many other ones where you can go in and select the object that you may want to buy and visualize it in your place of where you want it today. Nice. So there's lots of these things that are just starting to happen all over the place. And that's just one example, but we're seeing it over and over. I mean, like to your point, I think the stuff going on in healthcare is especially fascinating, because one of the biggest challenges, God forbid somebody gets a type of cancer, it's not, there's treatments out there for it. It's always the hard part is which treatment is right for the patient. And so we've been working with some of the leading oncologists in the world to understand how to do a digital twin of just like a tumor. Because one of the challenges when you get something like that is they might go through thousands of different attempts to find the right treatment, and that's what's so brutal on the human. Now, if they knew exactly day one the right thing to be done, then we're getting closer to cure cancer, and that's happening because of a digital twin. It's amazing.
It's a remarkable time. So I think we're going to get the high sign in a couple minutes. We have a couple minutes left. Yeah, I see.
Lock the doors. We'll stay all
All right.
day.
I get the low sign. 7. So we got some time left. I think we can do one. Francis, I'd love to give you sort of a last word. We do have a one more thing, so stick around because there's something to watch. It should be pretty cool.
Where's the black turtleneck?
Yeah, I didn't bring my black turtleneck. It's a little warm under these lights. So we got one more thing for y'all, and then if we have a couple minutes, we don't have time for questions. We'll be around for a few more minutes outside. So Francis, any last thoughts around how this aligns with conversations Deloitte is having with their clients, and really how is this very privileged relationship? I think as we're describing it, how's it taking shape?
Yeah, so I think the one of the things I think is so critical for our relationship together between Deloitte, NVIDIA, is really looking at the innovation is around connecting the dots, right? Connecting dots between amazing research, amazing technology, amazing perspectives with equally real use cases that can help bring different types of applications together to make it impactful. So that's kind of where I talk about the wine and cheese story for us. I think this is not about us. This is actually about you, right? One of the things I wanted to just share, one observation is, like every time moment where there's a generational shift, Richard talked about this rise of like new titles of chief Metaverse officer or chief of anything. One thing that is I see it's across all the major innovative forward-leading businesses is their data scientists and their designers start to become a pod. I've seen chief design officers driving AI agenda. I've seen chief data officers driving design agenda. And oftentimes, 50% of their teams come from each discipline. So I think it's kind of a moment of just sharing, and I love to hear your sharing when we, outside or after this panel, is just get to know the other side in terms of how might data in context means a user, human-centered environments to design, right? So design, it's gonna be so much more interesting that we collectively, all of us get to create the next generation of the internet a lot more human-like.
Mm-hmm. That's amazing. Do you guys want to see something? Yeah? Yeah.
Can I set it up just a little bit?
Please, by all means, and just hit space bar then.
The space bar, okay. Yeah. So I brought a little sizzle reel of some of the work that's been done using our platform Omniverse with our third-party ISV partners. So whether it's Autodesk with 3ds Max or Maya or Houdini from Side Effects, or it's Revit. There's a lot of different software packages and a lot of different examples here. But the key thing, amongst the fact that they're all working together, is the time. Most of the things that you're going to see have been rendered in real time. A few years back, RTX technology was brought out from NVIDIA that allowed for real-time photorealistic rendering. Something for those of us that have been in the computer graphics industry for a lot longer than you want to know, could take days, if not weeks, to render. So, and that's for a frame. Now, everything that you're going to see here is either done in real time or very close to real time using RTX technology. So how far we've come in just 30 years of computer graphics, it's an amazing time right now. So just hit the space bar and let's hope it works. There you see some true to reality simulation as well. Just a little sample.
Really nice. Well, I want to thank you all for joining us today. Thank Francis and Richard. This has been incredible. And one more thing, just wait, because we're going to do some pretty exciting stuff, and maybe we'd love to do it with some of you. So let's be in touch. Thank you all.